Thank you for joining us today. We are thrilled to feature an exclusive interview with Jeri Surls, credit manager at Builders FirstSource. With over 9 years in the industry, Jeri holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of New Mexico. Having previously served in roles such as inside sales and operations management, she is now transformed into credit manager, where she undoubtedly experienced both challenges and growth throughout those changes. Thank you for joining us today, Jeri, and congratulations on being celebrated as a 2025 Woman in Construction.
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you currently do within Builders FirstSource?
So currently I'm the credit manager for Albuquerque, New Mexico, I guess altogether. We have a few locations in New Mexico, and then I do oversee a few locations in northern Arizona. So we have kind of a lot of different programs that we operate off of, and so we tend to have a manager over a program and not necessarily an area. So Arizona and New Mexico, and I've been back in credit since November. So I have kind of, like you mentioned, a varied background to get me back where I'm today.
So you said to get you back here, what made you want to come back to credit, or why did you leave in the first place?
So, I really did inside sales for the longest part of my construction career, and credit was kind of a fluke. And I did that starting in 2017, and I did that for about 5 years. And then I thought, ready to try something different. You know how that goes. And I ended up working for a home builder for about a year. And just, it's different when you work for a corporation versus working for a local, smaller company, right? There's just a lot of things that aren't what you're expecting. It was a great experience. I learned a lot about the whole process of building a home. But I did come back, and I came back in operations roles. So I did inventory control, I did operations manager, and then the cards just kind of worked out where there was a position open again in credit, and it was just a nice change to go from being outside in cold weather and windy weather and so sort of the uncomfortable bits of operations, right, to go back to kind of a more normal schedule and things that I feel like I probably they're better suited to my skills. So
it probably helps being in credit, seeing it from the other side too, because I mean, we could usually relate to or try to relate to what salespeople are doing or the operations side, but you've actually been in that, so you know how the relationship should work between the departments.
It's definitely a big help. There's a lot of things I can look at the tickets themselves, or when customers have questions about what they actually got delivered off of a ticket. I know what a lot of that means on a ticket versus it just being kind of a lot of gibberish, which most of it looks like that anyway. Although whatever they decide to call something in the computer is not what we call it in real life talking to a customer. So it's been really helpful to have the operations and the inside sales side to mix with the credit. It's a better picture of the whole thing for the customer. So
what brought you into the industry to start with?
My mom. I think I watched some of your other videos, and I think a lot of people have family who've been in either the industry or in credit specifically. And my mom has worked in construction the majority of my adolescent and early adulthood. And so she had always just really liked it. She liked that it's a little more laid back, right? It's business, but it's not a suit every day to come to work. And she always had good stories to tell about good relationships she had with customers and her coworkers. And I was in retail, and it was a fluke that I was in retail, and she had a spot open for part-time. And it's like I literally started out filing back when you actually had paper and you file paper, filing cabinet, thousands of pieces of paper, like 3-part invoices and things like that. And then we actually mailed invoices, so printed them, folded them, stuffed envelopes, sent those out. So I did that, and then worked my way into inside sales when they had a position open, and the rest is history.
So what has been the most rewarding part of your experience?
Honestly, I think relationship building, whether it's customers or coworkers, I think we don't get very far without having good relationships with everybody that we have to work with. And I joke quite a bit that, you're really good friends with someone who's 20 years or elder, but they like to come in with their checkbook and sit down and talk to you about whatever it is that's going on, right? And take the time to know you and have a conversation with you. And it's the same with the coworkers too. I have a lot of people that I'm still in touch with, even though we don't work together anymore. And I think that's probably the most rewarding part.
I mean, it seems like a big industry, but it's so tight. It's tight knit.
It is. That's the one thing, especially through the years of acquisitions and mergers and people going to other companies. And, Albuquerque specifically is a pretty small, it's a big city, but it has a small town kind of feel to it. And, everybody everywhere now. Like when you first started, I just knew people I worked with. And then as everyone kind of spaced out and moved out over the years, you have a lot of connections, a lot of people you worked with in some capacity. And that's really a huge benefit also.
Absolutely. So being in the industry for quite a while, have you faced any challenges as a woman?
Probably in inside sales, that was the hardest. And then moving into operations was the second hardest. I was inside sales during the downturn. And so I went being a data entry person, you just sit and enter orders all day, to having to interact with your customer base. And I think there was a lot of people, I know everyone knows this, but construction in general is kind of aging out in a lot of ways, right? There's a lot of people who've been doing this for 40, 50 years. And it's different to see a woman trying to help you sell something, buy something, when they're used to dealing with the guy they talked to for 20 years and that person's not around any longer. But I was really lucky. I had a few really great customers that took the time to teach me and show me things. We used to sell cabinet hardware, which was the hardest thing I've ever had to figure out in my whole life. And they would take me to the back and they would show me the parts they needed, and I could write down the part numbers and they explained what those things were. And if it weren't for those guys, it would have been a much harder thing. But I think that it's definitely been a difficult hurdle in a lot of ways. Operations was the same, right? I worked at a truss plant and I was the only female. So and then you're also in a leadership role and you're the only female in the leadership role. And so a lot of people aren't used to having to, take direction from someone like that. So, but I think that's the whole thing about relationships. You build those and people learn to trust you, and it doesn't matter. It becomes less important at some point.
So do you think just continuing to move forward and trying to build those relationships is what helped, or do you think that there was some other facet to it?
I think that is a big part of it. I do think that luckily the world we live in is, moving forward a little bit also. And I think that people are getting a little more used to seeing women in leadership roles and understand that at the end of the day, I don't think it matters who it is necessarily, as long as the overall goals being accomplished and everyone's happy and being treated fairly. And the good of the company is the main goal and not anything else. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So like you said, you've seen that the industry is growing. Have you noticed anything in particular that is making it easier for women to join in the industry or get farther?
I think a lot of it, honestly, is just that we're kind of in this shift of the age of people in the industry, because I think we've seen a lot of people have to retire. And so a lot of your new leadership are younger people. And I think there's less of a concern in the younger generation about who's doing what, as long as the person's doing the job well. So I think that's probably one of the bigger shifts. I think that we're more reliant on technology and things. I think that all helps also. So there's definitely a lot of outside influence on why the industry, I think, is getting better. But I do think just internally, there's the shift in kind of the generational folks working, and that change is happening there too.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that yet. That's actually a really interesting way to think of it, because it used to be the old man, you work by the handshake. And that is kind of those people are retiring now, and it is getting more of the younger generation.
Yeah, so a lot of people are texting or emailing now instead of having to worry about being on site and shaking hands. So I think that's changing a lot of what people's expectations are, just dealing with the company in general. So for sure,
definitely see that. Yeah, I can definitely see that. So what advice would you have for a woman that's looking to get into the industry?
I think having a thick skin is a huge thing. And I think that goes for men and women in this industry. I think people in construction are very quick to be angry and then very quick to get over it.
True,
right?
True.
But you have to know that when they're quick to be angry, it's not necessarily you they're angry at. They're just, that's kind of the venting that needs to happen. And then everybody kind of comes back to normal and things get resolved. And then I think just having the confidence to know that if you are good at your job, it gets you somewhere without having to, I don't know the best way to describe it, but questioning yourself makes everybody else question you. So to have the confidence to come in and say, this is correct, this is the right part you need, this is the right answer you're looking for, this is, let me get the right information if I don't have it, and just being confident in your answers and your dealings with your customers and your other coworkers, I think is a huge part of succeeding in construction.
What is a most unexpected thing that you've had on the job?
I don't know. There's a lot of things, right? I will tell you part of our operations, why I'm glad to not necessarily be in operations any longer, but we worked in kind of a remote part of town and we're on septic system. And there was a whole week where we did not have restrooms that worked. And we weren't close to anywhere where we could really go use a restroom.
Oh,
And
no.
so I know people were having to take breaks to go a couple miles to use a gas station.
Oh, wow.
We were having to bother our neighbors because there's very few women and we don't have as many options if we need to use the restroom. We were bothering them and they were like, you guys can't keep coming over here and using our bathroom. So I had to bring donuts to apologize, and we had to have the plumbing company come out and constantly snaking the drains. And then we had to have porta potties on site off and on. And it's just the stuff you don't expect to have to think about when you go to work, right?
Definitely
You
not.
go to
Definitely
work and
not.
expect to have working plumbing, but that was a fun challenge.
For those watching, thank you for tuning into our special edition vidcast series, and we hope to see you next time.